Look into someone's eyes and you will notice something strange. Two people, same species, same face, same basic anatomy, but one pair is dark brown and the other is almost transparently blue. One is green, one is hazel, shifting between three colors depending on the light. And for most of human history, people treated eye color the same way they treated skin color, as a signal, as a category, as a reason to sort people into groups. But biology, again, tells a very different story, because eye color is not a feature that evolved to separate people. It evolved to solve a problem, a very specific, very physical problem that every human eye had to deal with every single day. And the answer to that problem starts not in genetics or ancestry charts, but in the part of your eye that most people never think about at all. Your iris is not just decorative. It is not just the ring of color that makes your eyes look interesting in photographs. The iris is a muscle. It controls how much light enters your eye. When it is bright, the iris contracts and your pupil shrinks. When it is dark, the iris relaxes and your pupil opens wide. The iris is a living aperture, constantly adjusting, constantly protecting the sensitive tissue behind it. And like almost everything else in the human body that needs to manage light, it uses melanin to do it. Melanin, the same pigment that determines skin color, hair color, the color of almost every external surface your body produces. Melanin is not just color, it is a biological tool. It absorbs light, it scatters radiation, it acts as a filter, and in the iris, it does the same thing it does in skin. It controls how much gets through. Here's the thing most people do not realize. The back layer of every human iris, regardless of eye color, is almost always dark, almost always packed with melanin. That layer does not change much between people. What changes is the front layer, the stroma. The amount of melanin sitting in that outer part of the iris is what determines whether someone has brown eyes, green eyes, hazel eyes, or blue eyes. More melanin in the stroma means darker eyes. Brown is the most common eye color on Earth, and it is the most ancient. The first Homo sapiens almost certainly had brown eyes, the same logic that applies to skin. Brown eyes are heavily pigmented. They absorb more light. They scatter less of it back out. Under intense tropical sunlight, heavily pigmented eyes protect the internal structures of the eye from UV damage. The lens, the retina, the delicate cells that convert light into vision. They are all vulnerable to ultraviolet radiation. More melanin means more protection. So in high UV environments, dark eyes were the safer design. But then something happened, something specific enough that scientists can actually point to it. Roughly 10,000 years ago, near the region that is now the Black Sea, a single human being was born with a genetic mutation. A change in a gene called HERC2 that reduced the activity of another gene called OCA2. OCA2 is one of the main genes that tells your body how much melanin to put into the iris. When HERC2 mutated, it turned OCA2 down. And when OCA2 was turned down, melanin production in the iris dropped significantly. The result was blue eyes. Not because that ancestor was from a different kind of people, not because blue eyes were present all along somewhere, because one person in one place in one generation had a mutation, and that mutation spread. Every blue-eyed person alive today carries that same change. Every single one. A Danish person with pale blue eyes and a person in South America with blue eyes inherited the same alteration, passed down through thousands of years and thousands of generations from the same original source. Blue eyes are not a category. They are a family, an enormous, scattered, unknowing family connected by one ancient typo in one gene. But that raises the obvious question. Why did the mutation survive? Evolution does not tend to keep changes that are neutral forever, and it does not tend to spread changes that are harmful. If dark eyes were protective, why did less melanin stick around? Part of the answer is probably the same logic that applies to skin. In northern latitudes, the sun is weaker. UV levels are lower. The risk of UV damage to the eye is genuinely reduced compared to equatorial regions. In those environments, the intense protection of dark eyes matters less. So the cost of having lighter eyes drops. But lower cost does not explain why blue eyes spread so far, so fast. A mutation that is merely neutral should drift slowly. Blue eyes moved too quickly for that, which brings in the other explanation, one that evolution uses constantly and that humans almost never want to admit. Sexual selection. People chose partners partly based on appearance. Blue eyes were visible, they were unusual, they were striking. In a world where almost everyone had dark eyes, lighter eyes stood out. And in many cases across many generations, standing out was attractive. Attractiveness affected who reproduced. Who reproduced affected what traits survived. This is not comfortable to admit because it sounds superficial, but sexual selection is one of the oldest forces in biology. Peacock tails exist because peahens found them attractive. Complex birdsong exists because it worked as a signal. Humans are not immune to this. They never were. Green eyes add another layer of complexity. Green is not just less melanin than brown. It is less melanin combined with the physics of light. When there is only a small amount of pigment in the stroma, the way light scatters through the iris creates different apparent colors depending on the structure. This is the same reason the sky looks blue. Not because the sky contains blue pigment, because of the way short wavelengths of light scatter through the atmosphere. In eyes with low melanin, the same scattering effect can produce blue or green depending on the exact amount of pigment present. Blue eyes have almost none. Green eyes have a little. Hazel eyes have more, mixed unevenly. Brown eyes have enough that scattering does not matter. The melanin simply absorbs the light before it can scatter. This is why eye color is so variable. It is not a simple on-off switch, it is a gradient, a spectrum of melanin levels combined with structural physics, producing hundreds of slightly different shades that humans have sorted into 4 or 5 rough categories, and called it a system. And that system breaks down the moment you look carefully. Hazel eyes can look green in one light and brown in another. Light brown eyes near the equator and light brown eyes in Northern Europe got there through different paths, different genes, different histories. The categories people use for eye color are convenient fictions. The biology underneath is a continuous dial. There is one more complication: babies. Most babies with European ancestry are born with blue or gray eyes. Not because they will definitely have blue eyes as adults, but because melanin in the iris continues to develop for the first year of life, sometimes longer. The stroma starts with very little pigment. As melanin is produced and deposited over months, eye color can shift from blue to green to hazel to brown. Some people's eyes settle quickly, others shift slowly. Some never settle. A small percentage of adults have eyes that continue changing color slightly throughout their lives. Not dramatically, not magically, but measurably. And now the modern world has broken the old rules again. A person whose ancestors spent 10,000 years adapting to low UV northern skies now lives in Singapore. A person whose eyes evolved to handle intense tropical light now works indoors in Oslo under fluorescent lights for 9 months of the year. We have glasses, we have contact lenses, we have sunglasses, and UV blocking coatings. The environmental pressure that shaped eye color over thousands of generations has been almost entirely bypassed in a single century. Your eyes still carry the record of old skies, old migration routes, old choices made by people who did not know they were making evolutionary decisions. They were just living, just surviving, just finding partners and having children and moving to new places and doing it again. And somewhere in that long chain of anonymous lives, a mutation appeared. A quiet change in a single gene, in a single person, passed forward until it became a face across a table, a stranger on a train, a child who inherited a shade of color that began with one accidental change 10,000 years ago. So why do humans have different eye colors? Because we started in one place with one level of sunlight, with one basic design. Because we moved. Because the environments we moved into changed what was costly and what was not. Because one mutation appeared and happened to be attractive enough to spread. Because evolution is not designing toward anything. It is just just keeping what works and discarding what does not, slowly, blindly, over thousands of generations. Eye color is not identity. It is not heritage in the way people mean when they treat it as a mark of origin. It is physics and pigment and ancient movement written into the front layer of your iris. Every shade is a record, not of what kind of person you are, but of where your ancestors stood under the sky. And every time the light hits your eye and you see color looking back, you are seeing the echo of a very long journey that started long before anyone alive today had a name for any of it.